Welcome back to Wednesdays Live, everybody, and hope you're staying warm on this chilly day in Iowa. Continuing with the subject of composition, this week I wanted to talk about the importance of shapes and making interesting shapes and all the problems that can arise and all the potential solutions that we might use to come up with them. And maybe the most important thing to remember is that the eye is a sense and it likes to have something to do. So all of our shapes should be engaging and they should create a kind of an interesting visual ride for the eye as it moves through the composition. So that, having said that, well, how do we go about that? Sure, there are interesting shapes, but how are they engaging the whole of the composition? We already have a rectangle or a square, depending on what we're working with. And the thing to watch out for is echoing the edge of the canvas or the paper or the frame. We don't want to put a rectangle in a rectangle. Hi, Pat. How are you doing? So sometimes you may have to do that. You can see here I have a lot of rectangles inside rectangles. There are some potential problems there. So what can we do to remedy that? I'm going to show you some potential solutions for that. I'm just going to show you some examples from other things. By the way, this is an interesting little restaurant in Venice. Here I am on location painting it. There's the from my sketchbook. That's what I was made. I was obliged to sit where I wouldn't be in oncoming people walking and vehicles driving, that sort of thing. I really wanted to be in this position. So I ran out there, stood, took a photo, and now I can make a picture from that. But what can we do as far as shapes for rectangles? Downtown Fairfield, here's a very similar kind of situation, rectangle in a rectangle. One thing you can do is you can try to make a conglomerate shape out of several shapes. Here, this is in Eldon, the town where the American Gothic was painted, or was the subject. This is a defunct railroad bridge going across the river. Tied the shore and the pylons from the bridge, and they all connect together. So you can make a conglomerate shape out of the thing. It's probably not going to be able to happen here. I can do it with things in there, so I can do a little of that. So that's one clue. You can try to connect your shapes in similar ways. This is in Dubuque on the Mississippi. You know, we've got a big wedge coming across here, a thin wedge. Hi, Jan. This barge here is actually basically a wedge, but we're tying it across, coming across here, connecting with it, tying it together. That was the thing that we were trying to get across last week, is tying shapes together with shadow or light. So then the water itself becomes a wedge, so you get a wedge, wedge, wedge. Anything we can do to create a little interest. That one pushes this way. This one pushes that way. Connect top to bottom with the things like that. Most people wouldn't want to paint this. Most people wouldn't want to paint that. I have painted those things. Here is the Millwork District in Dubuque. Another thing we can do is make sure that our negative shapes, or the shapes behind the thing we're painting, are as interesting as the shapes of the things themselves. There are, everything in a painting is a thing. Nothing gets left out. The sky, see how that makes a very interesting, odd shape. It's almost the most interesting shape in the picture, except for that. Here we have a shape. It's not, we haven't plunked this down in such a way as to create bilateral symmetry. It would be bad to maybe approach this church steeple from another angle so that what we had on either side was very similar. So that shape, ins and outs, it's an eye ride. The eye likes to have something to do. Up and down, in and out, up and down, in and out. So another thing we can do is we can create echoes. So you have this big shape with these little protrusions sticking up. Well, then you can tie this together as a conglomerate shape with all these people and their legs sticking down. So their legs can form a bit of an echo to what's happening on top of the domes there. Another potential problem when we position our shapes is things which have a kind of regular distribution, similar size and similar intervals. So yeah, it's nice. The gondolas break that up. This breaks that up. So that helps. But sometimes it might be a good thing to try repositioning yourself so that those things happen at an angle, so that they're wider apart here, narrower, 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 narrower. And at the same time, we use the solution of tying a big shape into this other thing to make these one conglomerate shape, the person, the gondola, the posts, so that, and other gondolas and other docks, so that they're not isolated and sitting there by themselves. So it is probably important to say that there might be a reason where you would put something in the middle and isolate it and have it on its own. Hi, Mickey. When shapes float within a rectangle or just in the middle of a painting or something like that, it tends to have a different feel. If you're trying to portray a natural space, an external space, like I always am, then floating things and having them kind of divorced from anything else in the picture sort of fights with the illusion of creating space that you might want to do. On the other hand, if you wanted to create something more like an abstract painting or like a mandala or something like that, where you're trying to express a kind of an internal space or an internal experience, something like that centered or floating might have the right feel. And you could combine these two approaches to get something that might. I mean, it's not that you can't have something kind of floating in the middle. Here's Mont Saint-Michel. I've made it into a conglomerate shape with its reflection in the water, and it is an interesting eye ride on itself, but it does sort of float there on its own. But it's an imposing thing. You wouldn't, want to stick it off as, well, you could, but hopefully you get the idea there. Different approach to placing things on the page gives a different feel. So let's talk about this image while we draw it. We've got some potential problems here. I've got a lot of geometric shapes. There's basically two kinds of shapes. There are man-made shapes and there are natural shapes, which are usually more organic and free, versus the man-made shapes tend to be solid geometrics, triangles, rectangles, squares, that sort of thing. So look at that. We've almost got a square up in the corner here. So I'm going to bring that thing down. And here we've got a terrible problem. We've got this street just cutting us off. And if it weren't for the fact that that goes like that, we'd almost have something of a flag going. So I'm going to very casually position these shapes. I've got a roughly triangular shape here. For this awning. Fascinating little place. Look at this. Look at all the awnings back here, so I can echo that. These, you can see, were not there earlier. They all came out and set these things up, and all of a sudden there was a restaurant in there, and they put out tables and chairs, and then at lunchtime then the restaurant thing happened, and they had a delicious cod croquette. So I'm just finding where on this, my positions. I've got another awning happening over here. So I've got a light shape with some things that go like that. I can take advantage of that to make something different. I've got windows protruding from this area over here. And notice I've got one that just comes in from the top corner and one that is almost, neither one of them are fully shown. So that's one thing I can do. If I've got a rectangle here, by putting in rectangles of windows, if I'd have put these rectangles fully, all four sides of them, it would have reinforced the rectangularity of this area and perhaps create a problem there. So I've got enough of it to everybody knows that, well, heck, that's a window. So two sets of these. There's the tables all happen in here. The umbrellas from the other tables. There's a roughly triangular shaped roof line back here. And some slight diagonals from the roof lines because the street is going like this. So those are helpful items there. So here's trying to make this shape in here interesting. One of the things that happens that helps with that is making the street light come out. There's the balcony area, which creates a kind of an irregular shape. I can certainly use that. Very much similar to that thing with the guy on the lift last week. So then I have another balcony window with some plant action. There was a church back here that would have been the steeple. So looking for shapes. Look for the triangle in there. I'm going to draw these a little darker so you can see them as we paint. I'm particularly going to try and use the irregularity of these people in and out, going up and down. And I'm going to feature, I hope, a few of them. I want a waiter. They're in silhouette, of course, because they're in shade. There's some lovely awnings coming in from elsewhere. Tables and linens. Silhouettes of heads of seated people. Make sure we end our buildings in the same places elsewhere. Crowds of people walking around. And I probably would have put these awnings in, or these umbrellas in, even if they weren't there, just to echo the big one. And again, sneaking in from the side is a irregular shape of the chair backs are rectangular too, so we have an additional problem. Yeah. So more people. Remember, the heads are going to be more or less the same height no matter where they are. The feet will be in a different place. And the figure as a whole will be much more. Jimmy, hello. Much more. Oh, now see that guy, he's too tall. Keep my heads, for standing people at any rate, at about the same place. Probably my chairs should be a little lower. Yep. I'm going to put a chair there too. There underneath this window, another window, some business here. So these lines, anything that will break up a horizontal or a vertical. Now, the elephant in the room. What are we going to do about this? So we do have a cast shadow from a building. So I am going to change the character of that shadow, and I'm going to make it slightly diagonal. And then I'm also, well, let's see, do I want to pitch, which way do I want to pitch it? I could pitch it this way. I could pitch it that way. I think I want to pitch it that way. Well, I've also got the diagonal of the tile, or the flagstones there. So it gives me a lot of possibilities there. So, hello, Michael. Hi, Carol. I need to know there's strong shadows underneath all the chairs and the tables. And it's not equal. That's the lovely part. That breaks up that horizontality. I'm going to do, I'm going to do it this way. We don't know what's over there. Nobody knows unless they're actually there. There's some shutters. This was our last day in Venice, and I was crazy running around painting everything I could while I had the chance. Okay. Never missing it. If you ever have the opportunity to go, you must go. You must go. One of the most fascinating places on earth. Okay, I think I've got enough going here to... I really shouldn't draw that shadow, I should paint it. Oh boy, wouldn't a pigeon be just the thing for there? Gosh. Off to the side. Off to the side, a pigeon. Again, that's something I should probably paint rather than draw. All right, now we're going to think about how to paint this. We've got a lovely red, yellow, blue color scheme going on here with some neutrals. Roughly reddish, pinkish buildings. This lovely yellow ochre sort of stucco work. I think I'm just going to put them in rather bluntly. Big mop. I probably should start with a cleaner palette, but we'll see. Runny mixes, well, let's get our yellow ochre. It's a bit orangier than that. Maybe I should get my pinks ready to go too. I'm going to mop that out. Get a little bit of red and some burnt sienna iron oxide, just to get pinkish. I'm not worried about all these windows. Those are darks that go on top. That's a dark that goes on top. Not worried about those things. What I am worried about is leaving some white down here, missing those. I'm going to leave those white and maybe tint them a bit later. So let's start with our pinks, so that we can get to our blues. It's going to look dark. And by that I mean that there's going to be blue going in here. So if I do this first, then, oops, careful with your umbrellas, John. Let's put a little bit of yellow ochre into that. So we're putting runny into runny there. Everything that comes on top of here is, for the most part, going to be darker. I might leave a few light skips. people dressed in white or something like that. And then we're going to get into the yellow ochre in earnest. Everything over here. Probably want to go darker with that. Maybe put a little neutral tint in it. Particularly in this area here. While that's wet, we're leaving a bead. Let's throw a little bit of bright yellow in there just to keep that from being too much of the same thing. There is a white sill, limestone sill there. Trying to miss this awning. Some of this other stuff, it's going to be darker anyway. Now, I'm going to put a little bit of the red and I want this to be darker and browner underneath. I think you can probably see that. So this is going to be more of a bronzy color. Again, let's put some of the brighter yellow into it as well to maybe even some of the orange, just to get a different character. Now, a little more neutral tint, which makes it kind of an olive color. I want to miss this tabletop. More neutral tint. Keeping this edge over here wet. Hopefully you can see where I'm going to start going into my dark shapes, some of which are going to get darker still. Backs of those chairs. Yeah. More neutral tint, maybe even a little blue. Runny paint into runny paint. Silhouettes of heads, waiters, leaving the occasional white in here, down to the shadow. Let's get more of that going. A little bit of blue, well, how about some, it's got to be dark and it's got to be neutral. Get the chairs. I'm squinting. I'm just, what do I see? Very dark in there, very dark. Very dark under here. Let's put a little turquoise in it, just to change it up. People eating. people walking. Shapes, it's shapes. I'm not worried about making things, I'm making shapes. Everything when I was showing you the pictures of the silhouettes of the building, and as soon as I get this, I will go back to it. I'm going to put a little Prussian in there even. Red and Prussian, just to make it weird. Yes, Jane, that's there's a big wooden bridge that goes over the Grand Canal where the classic view of Santa Maria della Salute that everybody paints because it's bloody beautiful and everybody should paint it. That's behind us here. And I had a wonderful time painting off of that. As soon as I'll show you the picture I made, maybe in a bit here, squinting away. Because we will need to let this dry a bit. But this was a little piazza that didn't pop up. It was there, but they put out the now this is thicker paint into a wet surface. So I want a strong dark in here in places. Oh, look at here, particularly. Always remember that when you're painting, if the area is still glistening or showing some wetness, then you can paint in it. But be careful. If you bring in something the same consistency, runny paint into runny paint, then what's going to happen is the two are going to dilute one another and they will disperse everywhere. If you want to create a more distinct shape, then you have to bring in thicker, slower moving paint so that the edges soften, but the shape more or less stays where you put it. So here's our waiter. I'm going to put some more people back here, maybe another standing figure. How about we go up to, let's put a little bit more of some reddishness into this. Again, variety, because I want this sort of purplish. I see that as being a little bit purpley. Probably should be using a different brush here. Get the Oriental brush. Yep, and I'm going to need a lot more paint. As always, it's the value of the thing that counts. Where the hue is going, that's a different story. You can change the hue. This has some like pointy elements that allow me, oh, you know what? I shouldn't be doing this until I do my sky. So I'm going to do a little bit of this and we're going to have to let it dry. I'm having too much fun. Okay. I'm having too much fun painting shapes. Shapes are the entire fashion industry is predicated on shapes, silhouettes. What does this make us, the person wearing the clothing look like? So we're using shapes to make other shapes. To sort of, for example, here we're kind of trying to frame this umbrella. Some very, very dark areas in here. There's going to be some tinting going on in there. There's in here is a big, big dark window. Comes all the way down to that area there. Put one up there. Let's make that greener. They were sort of greenish shutters. Hi, Brent. I'm going to put some red into that green to make it different, but keep it the same value for the window proper. There doesn't appear to be any oh golly, some pipes or who knows what. Modernization from electricity and who knows what else. I can see right away that area in there needs to be darker. And we will darken that up. We'll glaze it. So two things I didn't do that I should have done is I should have continued down here with a neutral color. Let's try to do that now. Let's just get some of everything. And some water to make it very runny and very light. And make it slightly sexier color as we come forward, so I'm going to put a little bit of turquoise into it. Well, we're going to get, doesn't matter because down here we're going to be doing a shadow anyhow. But this is just for the lighter area underneath the shadow. And as you can see, my darks here are starting to run. So I will recover those shapes. We'll put some shady bits on these white tablecloths. I'm also going to put a little bit of burnt sienna into that very runny mix to get a neutral, well, let's put a little blue in it too. I want a cooler neutral than I used down here maybe. So and then I'm going to switch to a warmer, ooh, it's too much, a warmer neutral. Under the awning. Reflected light under those things tends to be warm. And you know what? That would probably be a good glaze color to darken this area under here. A little more neutral tint. Yep. I think that helps. Looks shadier. Leave a bit of it here or there. I'll have to attend to that a little bit later. Let's see, back here, just some miscellaneous cool color, and the lavender is good for that. Side of this structure back there, Eve shadow, Eve shadow, Eve shadow. Perhaps some, oh, let's put an Eve shadow or a shadow on this. Same onto the same here. Okay, so we made this part darker, so we got to make the front portion darker as well. All right, we're starting to get there. We're starting to get there. Big things first. Big things first. That's dry enough. That's dry enough. I'm going to mop this out, and I'm going to need a big purplish shadow because it's about shape, so you got to get your shapes established. Don't get too far like I've done here before you put in a key shape, and this is a lot of real estate. Every shape in a painting is important. The negative shapes, the positive shapes that are things. Everything in a painting is a thing. Hi, Lisa. Try to not have the attitude that, you know, this is background. That shape is important. That's the thing that from across the room is going to get the viewer's attention, that big irregular shape. These big shapes like that. So even though that's kind of background, or maybe this thing in here or that thing in there, just because it's not something per se, doesn't mean that it's unimportant. I always think about, you know, you're listening to a symphony or something, and the thing is going for an hour and a half, and there's this poor guy in the back who's standing there in a probably very uncomfortable rented tuxedo, and he has to sit there all that time, and then at the end of it, you know, he gets to go like with the cymbals, and then grabs his mallets and then boom, 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 boom on the timpani, and then the whole thing is over. And, you know, he had to stand there all that time. Well, it's in the composition, and it's very important. If you took that out, it wouldn't be as good. It all has to be there. So I'm keeping this the same value, but I'm changing the hue, putting a little more blue towards the front. Oh, burnt sienna, cobalt, ultramarine, basically purplish. And I'm just going to let that, well, while that dries, I can attend to that sky that I should have attended to earlier. And I'm going to get some of these shapes under here. So there I'm making a connection. I'm connecting with that. So that has to get darker too. Connecting with that. Connecting with that. If there's some little light thing that needs to come out, we'll get it later. We can lift it or we can use the gouache right out of the tube. So what am I doing? What am I doing? Up here. Now before I do that, the sky, I'm going to erase. I'm going to dry it just to be safe. So I'll mute this and you won't have to listen to it. Okay, we're back. So now what I'm going to do is just erase some of those stray pencil lines that I don't want back there, or maybe right here, or over here, or my tablecloths. Okay, from here on out, it's going to be small marks and little things. Other than this big shape, which do as I say, not as I do. Should have been attended to earlier. So I'm going to mop this area out. I'm going to get let's get some cerulean or something. Running mix. Gingerly meeting this area down here so that I don't disturb that. I'm using a very light touch. Add a little bit of water to it. A lot of water to it. In fact, I'm just going to use water and let it work its way down. So that I get a gradation. And I will evacuate that. Now, where else could I use that blue? I think I could use some of it down there. It's a little bit of a sticking out too much. I might use a little bit of it in here on the shaded portions of the tablecloths. Perhaps a little bit back there. Maybe on that building. We'll put in some later. Any of the whites underneath here, I think, need to be turned blue. Underneath the shade of the awnings there. Now we're dry and we can start doing little specific marks. So let's put some burnt sienna in that. Get a warmer. See, it doesn't move, so it's well, you know, thank you, Jane. Yeah, I one of the things I have to do is, you know, make sure I'm not going further than I ought to. Some chair backs. Thank you, Jane. You just made a good point. If you've got a lot more to say that you could put in or might put in, and it starts to look finished or looks finished as is, that's a good indication you've done good things with your shapes, because the shapes are doing the talking, not the stuff. So I just think I need to be very, thank you for that warning. I am going to be very, very circumspect about what I start throwing in now. Where do I want some activation? I know I want it under here. That's a very deep shadow there. Under there. So I probably should have a stiffer brush because I'm making little marks. So I'm going to go to the nylon brush. The shapes do the talking. Thank you for bringing that up. Gosh, I wish I'd have thought of that when I was planning this. When a person comes into an exhibit or a room where there are paintings hung, it's those big shapes that they see from across the room that carry the painting. I'm making those two windows different. That's something you can do to alleviate the problem of, let's put some stuff on top of these tables. If you've got windows on a building, sometimes it's a good strategy to not make them all the same. Yeah. Boy, I tell you, we artists have trouble with that, don't we? I mean, we get to where we're having fun with something, and we keep going, and we should have stopped. Now, where should I be stopping here? I'm going to get some light, warm grays, and I'm going to put some indications of windows or chimney pots or TV antennae. This lovely thing coming across here breaks that shape up. I like it for that. Too dark. Blot them with a brush, damp brush. There's a thing. Windows that are close to you should not be as dark as windows. Windows that are close to you should be darker than the windows that are farther away, even if they are the exact same item. Okay, now I think the only other thing I want to do before I look at it well, I can see I want to have a strong, warmish dark back there somewhere in here. More windows, just suggestions of windows. So that we know that's actually what's going on back there. Perhaps something here. But the main thing I want to do now is put some lines in this to make these shadows look more transparent. So notice I'm doing it diagonally, which is what's there actually. So they have to get closer together as they go back, and perhaps less apparent, and thinner as they get further away. We don't have to have every last one of them. Find some, lose some. And it's just a good excuse to stick a diagonal element into something that's like a grid. I guess there should be a chair over here, shouldn't there? Yep. A couple of chairs over here. Perhaps that one's a little strong. Let's break them up a bit. And put some dirt on that. Thousands of people walking around here. Okay, let's detape, see if that tells us anything. Well, okay, I'll detape and then we'll talk about it. I saw something immediately. I've not dealt with that. And I should have. So it needs to be a kind of off color, kind of a khaki off. I don't want it to match the building. Whoops. Okay, just to separate it from this one. I also see that some of my tablecloths should be darker further down where they would be in shade. I could have the way those things pull unevenly. And boy, this one actually has a front to it. Suggestions of doors there. And hi, David. David was one of my traveling companions when we were in Venice. Okay, just maybe a little bit over there. Maybe, oh, my pigeon. Got to have my pigeon. I should probably look up a picture of a pigeon. There were a lot of them on St. Mark's. I'll find one there. Okay, so to review. Shapes, shapes, shapes. Very important. Nelia, hello. Thank you, Jan. The important thing is to make sure that the shapes are interesting, because the eye is a sense and it likes to have something to do. So if we're facing a situation where we have lots and lots of geometric shapes, try to find ways to put in an irregular shape, an organic shape. There's not much chance of that here, so that's probably going to make my pigeon very important. I'll have to put another one in. I'm going to find a picture of a pigeon and I'm going to make him a good shape. Break up the intervals. If you have a band like this, try to find a way to do something to it, or you could crop it. You could take it out altogether. Make sure that the shape here, the negative shape, is as important as the positive shapes. These little oddball shapes of the tablecloths are important because they're irregular, as is some of this back here. Try to tie shapes together. Like this comes down and I tie all those darks together. That was the task last week. Connect this with that. Connect whites together. Or, they don't have to physically connect. You can make them go near each other. That will help. Conglomerate shape. Echo shapes. Wedge, wedge. Triangle, triangles. Vary the size, vary the position. Here we go. This is a very important negative shape. Is as important or more important than that shape. Same here. If there's something like this, echo it with the legs. If you have things that are regular, like a disco beat, see if you can put them in a diagonal as opposed to breaking that space up. Or, as in this instance, you could break up that regularity by putting in the gondolas, the dock, San Giorgio, anything that will help you do something interesting with this too regular situation there. So I hope you guys enjoyed that. I was having too much fun here. I was probably getting involved in painting things. I should have gotten to that earlier. So here I'm going to connect back to these shapes with these shapes. And then we're going to make a better pigeon later. So thank you, Vicki. Thank you, Jane. Thank you, Michael. Hope you enjoyed that. Next week, I'm going to continue with the subject of composition 2. We're going to talk about, I think circulation, how the eye circulates through a painting. And my pigeon flew away. So anyway, thank you, Mickey. Everybody stay warm, stay safe, stay sane, and I'll see you next week. Bye-bye.